Hi everyone, this is Emily Leiphart here for Tailored Expressions, and in today's video I'm sharing projects using the ingredients from the Merry Blooms Cardmaking Kit. This is the most stunning kit and it includes so many beautiful ingredients for all your holiday card making needs. Here's a look at what you get with this kit. The first ingredient is the Merry Blooms background stamp, which stamps all the leaves that surround the poinsettias. The coordinating Merry Blooms stencil fits over top of the background and allows you to ink blend beautiful poinsettias in those spaces between the leaves. Next is the Merry Blooms clear stamp set, which includes all the details for the poinsettias and leaves. It also has single leaves you can use to create your own background or pattern. The perfect poinsettia dies coordinate with the stenciled poinsettias, and these cut right along the edge. They do not leave a white space around the stenciled image. Also included for all your sentiment needs is the Joyful Season Clear Stamp Set. This is a full 4" by 6" stamp set, and you'll see that there are coordinating dies for the 3 large sentiments, but please note that the sentiment dies are not included in this kit. You can get them as an add-on, and this is indicated when you go to the kit. The website will show you the option of adding those dies, and I highly recommend that you do since they look amazing when popped up or layered. As always, there are 6 envelopes, and this kit's colors are Sugar Cube, Toffee, Dijon, Cherry Pop, Mulled Wine, and Sweet Basil. There are also 6 envelope seals that say Merry and Bright. In your kit, you'll get a small pot of red and gold drip drops. I only have the gold ones, and I'll be featuring them on both my cards. Now let's get started. I'm starting my first card with an A2 panel of Sugar Cube cardstock. I use temporary adhesive on the back and put it in the center of my mini MISTI stamping tool. Then I place the Merry Blooms background stamp, which fills the entire space, and ink it up with the Sweet Basil ink. If I had the full-size ink pad, this would be a lot quicker, but having the MISTI stamping tool comes in handy no matter what. For my second card, I trim an A2 panel of Toffee cardstock and ink up the Merry Blooms background stamp using Sugar Cube pigment ink. This combination always looks so good. Moving on to the stenciling, I attach the first stamped background to my silicone mat and secure the Merry Blooms stencil on top. I'm using watermelon ink and a coordinating blender brush to ink blend the poinsettias on the background. I use more ink around the outer edges of the flowers. I love removing the stencil to reveal the poinsettias. They're so pretty. I clean off the stencil and, on a separate piece of Sugar Cube cardstock, I'm ink blending poinsettias from Dijon ink. I'm going to be die cutting these using the perfect poinsettia dies, and I'll explain more later. The steps for my second card can be done in a completely different order, and you'll see as I go back and forth to finish these flowers. Now I'm going to go back to the first background and stamp the veins on the flowers and leaves. There are 3 sizes of poinsettias and therefore 3 sizes of veins, and they don't take long to line up. I just spin the stamp until all 5 of the petals line up. I'm stamping these veins with mulled wine ink, and since almost all of them are off the edge, I have to spin the card panel and shift it from the top to the bottom of the stamping tool to fit all the stamps. I've cut out the section where I stamp the veins on the leaves with Sweet Basil ink, but I'll show you that step on the second card. I've chosen the Happy Holidays sentiment from the Joyful Season stamp set, which is easily centered in the blank space at the center of the card. There are plenty of secondary sentiments in the stamp set, and you can add those underneath one of the 3 large sentiments. I stamp the sentiment directly onto the panel using Oreo ink, and then I die cut it using the Joyful Season dies, which are sold as add-ons to this kit, and boy do I recommend them. I love shaped sentiment dies, especially ones like this that cut out the spaces between the 2 words. They also make it easy to stack layers of cardstock to create shadows or highlights like I'm doing here with gold glitter cardstock. I attach the panel to a mulled wine card base, then I use liquid glue to attach the layered gold die and the negative piece from the stamped layer. Then I pop up the stamped sentiment with foam tape and add gold drip drops in the centers of the poinsettias and a couple extras around the sentiment. I use my favorite Barely Arts glue with the fine tip nozzle and a jewel picker, also one of my favorite embellishment tools. Here's a look at the finished card before we move on to the second card. As I mentioned at the start of this video, the perfect poinsettia dies cut exactly to the line and do not leave a white rim around the image. These dies are also solid, so you can't see where you're placing them. Here's a trick I use when this happens, and it also works for much older dies in my stash, which tend to have solid backs that I can't see through. I cut the shapes from vellum cardstock so I can see through them. Then I use a bit of removable adhesive and attach them to the stenciled shapes I want to die cut. When I place the dies on top, they pop right onto the vellum shapes like a puzzle and don't move. I secure them further with removable tape before running them through my die cutting machine. As you can see, I get a perfect cut every time. And I always save these vellum shapes with my stored dies so I can reuse them. In this case, I'll be using these vellum shapes to layer the poinsettias for dimension. Now I pop those die cut pieces into the stencil and use removable tape to hold them in place. I place the entire stencil into my original Misty stamping tool and stamp the veins using sweet basil ink. Next, I use Toffee ink to stamp the veins on the now dry Toffee panel. For these little stamps, it's much easier to use an acrylic block rather than stamp them in the Misty. I use the Basil Arts liquid glue again to assemble the vellum layers with the die cut poinsettias and attach them to the panel. I also warm them up with my fingers and curl them slightly to give them dimension. At this point, I realized that I forgot to stamp the centers of the flowers. On the first card, I used the gold drip drops, and I think I was going to use them again here, but decided to use stamped centers in mulled wine instead. Just like the veins, there are 3 sizes of centers to match the sizes of the flowers. This was the first time I used the Basil Arts glue on vellum, and I was amazed at how well it held. It makes me like this glue even more, and I already rave about it. After all the poinsettias are layered and added to the Toffee panel, I attach the panel to a sweet basil card base and trim off the excess. I chose the season's greetings sentiment for this card, and I'm going to die cut it from colored cardstock. I couldn't decide between mulled wine and sweet basil, so I heat embossed it in gold on both colors so I could see it before choosing. I'm stamping the sentiment with watermark ink using gold embossing powder. I thought both versions looked equally good, but the mulled wine stood out more, especially since the card base was sweet basil. I also cut a layering piece from vellum, sugar cube, and Oreo cardstock and tested each one before settling on Oreo. It's amazing how different things look when I'm making them versus on video afterwards. I think I would have made different decisions based on watching the video versus seeing it in person. I attached the 2 layers together with the Basil Arts liquid glue, and I also used it to attach the sentiment to the panel. To finish, I added a few gold drip drops around the sentiment, and now my second card is done. Here's a quick recap of the 2 cards I made using the Merry Blooms kit. My first card features more traditional Christmas colors and a straightforward approach to the products provided in the kit. To make it more festive, I added an extra element of gold behind the die-cut sentiment, and I love how the drip drops play off it. My second card also features gold elements, but the gold poinsettias could be considered a third gold element. I love the layered vellum, which blends in nicely with the sugar cube pigment ink on Toffee. The flowers add so much dimension to the card, which I really love. I always try to keep my cards as flat as possible for mailing, but it's impossible. I hope you enjoyed this video and you're inspired to create with the Merry Blooms kit. I have a feeling this kit will sell out quickly, so grab one while you can and get a jump start on your holiday card making. You can find all of these products in the Tailored Expressions web store at tailoredexpressions.com. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you again soon.